Hello again there, everyone. Thank you so much for dropping by another edition of a Digital Desk installment here in the Valley News Live studios. We've got some politics to look at, and the political landscape, of course, is getting more intense by the day as we draw closer to the election and also deal with a potential attempt on former President Trump's life. In order to dive into all of this and so much more, we've got Washington, D.C. Valley News Live correspondent Josh Rultenberg joining us. Josh, how's everything going?
Pretty good, Gabriel. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, let's start off with what I just said about the apparent assassination of former President Trump. The suspect in this case made his initial court appearance earlier today. What do we know at this point in time? You know, the FBI is continuing to investigate, but what have the responses been from the White House and Congress, and what is the FBI looking at as far as this case goes?
Yeah, so as of right now, what we know over the last couple of hours from the White House is that President Joe Biden made a phone call to former President Donald Trump to check in on him. The White House says it was a very cordial conversation in which President Biden said to Donald Trump that he was glad that he was safe. Former President Trump thanked him for the call. We also know that President Biden and Vice President Harris have commended the efforts of the United States Secret Service to act very swiftly to make sure that former President Trump was safe. They've also said that there's just no room in America for political violence. On Capitol Hill, we're hearing a bipartisan effort is brewing to try to make sure that the Secret Service has all the resources that it needs and more to make sure that incidents like these are not popping up. But we also are hearing from House Speaker Mike Johnson, who is saying that there will be an investigation in Congress as to what exactly happened in Florida last night, but also that there needs to be some level of accountability considering this is the second attempt on former President Trump's life in the last 65 days. The FBI right now, they are continuing their investigation. We know that the suspect has been charged with 2 federal gun crimes. As of right now, there's nothing linking as far as crimes are concerned with the suspect with former President Donald Trump and the assassination attempt on his life. But we know that that investigation is ongoing and more charges could be coming in the coming days.
And speaking of the former president himself, you mentioned his response to what Biden's call was, but have we heard anything from him specifically on the matter as a whole? And has this affected his travel plans this week? How about Vice President Harris and her campaign stops? Any changes to either of those due to this most recent incident?
Yeah, nothing changing right now. It's full steam ahead for both of the campaigns. Start with former President Donald Trump, though. He's thanking the U.S. Secret Service for making sure that he was safe. But one thing he is doing, even though he talked to President Biden on the phone, he is personally blaming President Biden and Vice President Harris, saying that the words that they are using to describe him and calling him a threat to democracy is ultimately what are causing these shootings and these apparent assassination attempts. Now, there's no evidence to suggest that that's true, even though the former president is saying that. As far as their travel schedules are concerned, we know that the former president is going to be going to Michigan, to New York, and North Carolina over the coming days. We know Vice President Harris was here in Washington today. She's going to be going to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin over the coming days. And we also just know that security is going to be heightened for both of them when it comes to the U.S. Secret Service.
Well, then let's talk about election as a whole. It's a big picture. We're about 50 days out from the election itself. The polls have been swinging kind of all over the place. There was, of course, that initial bump that Harris received once she switched into that candidate role, but it seems like things have kind of leveled out a little bit. Also, many pollsters and experts in this situation say, you know, these numbers don't matter too much. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen until the actual day gets here. But how clear is the picture, if at all? Do we have any idea where things stand in this race for the White House?
Well, you have to remember, first, we're 50 days out, so that's a long time from Election Day. We know early voting starts soon, but Election Day itself is 50 days out. Also, when it comes to polls, people have to realize polls just represent a snapshot in time from when the poll is actually taken. This thing can change by the day, the month, what have you. So we have a lot of time in between now and Election Day. What we are seeing when it comes to the latest polling from ABC News and from Ipsos is that 2/3 of the country that watched that debate feels that Vice President Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump in that debate. But with that said, the polling is showing that it's still neck and neck in the swing states, because that's ultimately where this election is going to be won and where it's going to be lost. It's only a handful of states that are really up for grabs for that each candidate can try to get to 270 electoral votes. Now, according to the New York Times and their polling averages when it comes to swing states, It shows Vice President Harris is leading in every swing state except for Arizona and Georgia. Things are tied in Arizona, and in Georgia, it has former President Trump leading Harris. But everything is within the margin for error, so it could go one way or it could go the other way. We still have so much time before Election Day, so don't hold too much weight, especially when you see national polling, because the country does not vote as one nation. We vote as 50 individual states.
Well, let's look at something that's a little bit closer even than the election. This potential government shutdown. We're looking at about 2 weeks away from that thing happening by any possible chance. So what is it looking like in Washington? How much progress is being made on a deal? Anything that Congress is looking at so that they can avert this pretty catastrophic happening right before an election were to take place?
Yeah, it's very catastrophic anytime a government shutdown takes place, but of course there's going to be heightened attention around it when you have an election 50 days away. So the federal government runs out of money 15 days from now. On October 1st is the new fiscal year, and if there's no plan in place, there's no government, and government workers can't be paid, and anybody that relies on social services cannot receive those social services. So this is a giant deal. As far as any progress being made right now, they are not close. Republicans are not getting along with Republicans right now. In the House of Representatives, House Speaker Mike Johnson has put forward a plan where he wants to kick the can down the road 6 months to March of next year. But they also want to attach a messaging bill that says that you need to require proof of citizenship if you're going to vote. That has nothing to do with government funding, but it's something that Donald Trump and conservative Republicans want attached to any sort of stopgap funding measure. But we know that moderate Republicans are not on board with that, and we know that Democrats in the House and the Senate, nor is President Biden on board with that. So as of right now, things are going nowhere. We know that Democrats would like to see a short-term stopgap just to get to December, to get past the election. That's traditionally what happens here in Washington in an election year. So it's really up to House Speaker Mike Johnson if he's going to fold ultimately to conservative Republicans or if he is going to keep the government funded and have to work with Democrats to do so.
All right, Josh, thanks so much for the update on all of those things. Very timely, very, very important to keep an eye on these because they are rapidly developing situations and we could be headed towards catastrophe, as you said. And even if that is averted, then the election right around the corner, important to have our finger on the pulse with that. So we really appreciate you taking the time, dropping by the program, and giving us the latest.
You got it.
All right, that's going to do it for us here in the Valley News Live studios. We are going to be hanging out, preparing for our 9 and our 10 o'clock broadcasts, so make sure you tune in for that, for more political analysis and more about what's going on in the Fargo area. Thank you so much for dropping by Facebook Live. We'll see you next time.